Cool. Awesome. Yeah. How's it, everybody? Welcome to Conversations. It's the first Sunday of our live discussions, and we are doing an interview with Kayla Gibbs, who is an intern at Steve Biko. And in the month of August, we are going to be partnering with Faith Promise, and we're going to be interviewing missionaries and our partner ministries with Hatfield Christian Church. And it's just going to be an awesome time having a bit of an outward focus and gaining a bigger perspective of the field of missionary work and just, you know, the outside world other than just the normal church building and so forth. But it's going to be exciting. After this, you guys can go and check out, which it will be on our social media platforms. We also have an interview with one of our leaders, Shante, who is a paramedic, and she works with paramedics on call. I hope I said that right. But yeah, Kayla, welcome. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for availing yourself for us. I'm gonna jump in, and after we have a little conversation with you, then we're just going to spend a bit of time praying. And I'm going to ask you, Kayla, what exactly are you doing at Steve Biko?
So I'm a first-year medical doctor. So what that means is every 3 months we switch to different specialities. So right at the start of this pandemic, I was actually doing pediatrics and then jumped right into internal medicine, which is the department that actually deals with corona patients. And currently I'm doing my surgery rotation. So basically just normal day-to-day stuff in the hospital, dealing with emergencies, looking after sick people.
Yeah. Are you, so we're hearing a lot about it in the news, especially now, considering we, especially Gauteng is the hardest hit province, and not only that, we in our peak now. And I was reading an article the other day that our health minister was saying that the month of August and September is most likely going to be our highest months, and then from the end of September it's going to cool down a little bit. So you guys are obviously experiencing some sort of strain on the healthcare system. How are you guys managing with that? You know, being somebody on the front line, how are you experiencing that? And what are you seeing with that strain? And how is it affecting the normal day-to-day duties that the healthcare system actually has? And, you know, how is it influencing your response to everything?
Even one question at a time.
Big questions, but yeah, I just want to know, how's it?
Yeah. So basically,
because I mean, I say the other day, but she's with the paramedics on.
Yeah, so there's basically two kinds of phases that we've seen with the management of this pandemic. So we have the phase without alcohol and the phase with alcohol. I can say without alcohol, it's definitely helped us a lot. You know, in the initial stages where we had the complete alcohol ban, there would be times that the actual emergency room proper would be empty. And then as soon as alcohol came back, it was chock-a-block full, not one bed open. So being able to now only deal with critically ill patients and those who have, you know, minor traumas and stuff, it's definitely helped us to not have that additional burden of alcohol-related issues. So currently at Steve Biko, what we find ourselves experiencing is we kind of split in two. So before you admitted, we keep you outside, basically in these tents that we've gone, you know, set up, and we screen people and wait for them before they've got, to make sure they don't have corona before we allow them to come into the hospital. Because it's a quaternary hospital, we're trying to keep it as clean as possible with regards to infection. So on the one hand, we have to go completely outside of the hospital and deal with those patients, full PPE, out in the cold, power outages, limited resources, minimally trained auxiliary healthcare workers. And then we have the burden of dealing with patients inside the hospital who, some of them have corona. So we've set up Tshwane as being our corona hospital. So we basically take shifts there. So in addition to our normal working hours, we now have what we call our COVID shifts. So that's where we work 8 to 12 hours, depending on which shift you're doing, dealing solely with the COVID patients. So we'll have wards with exclusively COVID positive patients. Some of them are more asymptomatic kind of patients, and the other ones do require quite a bit of medical attention. So there is that additional burden of healthcare needs that we're seeing.
Yeah, sure. Sounds like a lot's happening. And the question that I always have is like, how long is this thing going to last for? And I mean, I've had conversations with you, and I would really love you to just share your views on that, because you say you believe it's going to be around a little longer than we wanted to. And so why is that? And what can we do? Because we don't want it to stay for longer.
Yeah, so currently the heads of the infectious disease department are saying that it's going to extend to the end of next year, possibly into 2022. And the reason why that is because it basically comes down to people not taking precautions. People not wearing masks properly, people not sanitizing, people thinking, well, it's okay, I know my family and friends, those people won't have corona. So there's a lot of, I think people have become a little bit complacent in how they are managing their health and in, maintaining precautionary measures. So I think that's basically the biggest reason why we're going to see this continuing. And I think in addition to that, being in South Africa, we do have this inequality in terms of people being able to social distance. It's easy for us who have houses, we are able to maintain social distancing. We have toilets in our houses. It's easier. People living in townships who are right on top of each other, even if they are trying to be careful and taking precautions, I'm sure it must be even more difficult for them, especially if you have children at home who obviously want to go out and play with their friends and things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I would like to know, just because I mean, you and we've had a lot of theological discussions as well, and just from somebody being in the healthcare system and on the front line, where do you see, or what can we as a church do in this time to actually assist the healthcare system? Because I mean, obviously, like in my thinking, it's prayer, but I mean, what are the practical things as well, other than just taking precautions? I don't know if there's something more, and perhaps you have that something extra that we can practice as well.
Yeah, so I think a really important thing that I think the church can play a role in is kind of, Stephen, you and I have spoken about how sometimes people who contract corona, they feel shame. And I think as Christians and as a church, we know that shame is not from God. And we know that it is something that really affects people. And when people are now having the shame of having the virus, we're seeing that they're not telling those around them that they have the virus, which means they're further spreading it. So I think as a church, we can step up and be like, hey guys, just because you have corona doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, that you did something wrong. And I think another thing that we can do is, being an example of what it means to wear masks properly and to sanitize and to socially distance. As a church, a big part of what we do is fellowship. And I think there are ways that we can show people how to fellowship without spreading the virus. You can meet up at a restaurant now that we are allowed to do that. And socially distance, keep your mask on when you're not eating or drinking, sanitize as often as possible. And I think these aren't necessarily only things that the church can do. I think as a wider society, we need to start doing these things, but the church definitely plays an important part in leading by example.
Yeah, that's really true. So maybe this is more of like a personal question, but I'm sure it goes through a few people's minds because sinus is real, right? And then like some days I'll wake up and then like my throat is kind of scratchy, and then like I panic and I'm like, well, should I go get tested? Like, do I have COVID-19 or whatever? How can I, because obviously I don't want to just go and get tested and then it's like an extra burden to the healthcare system. So like, how can I kind of manage that without me just, you know, giving into fear and just, you know, going and calling some other hotline or whatever, and then it's unnecessary. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even as a doctor, you know, there are even mornings that I wake up and I'm like, oh, I think Roro may have gotten me. So I think when it comes to that, an important thing to remember is first and foremost, there are other things that exist besides the coronavirus. We're in winter, so we are going to see cold, we're going to see your influenza virus, and we're going to see allergies. You know, that's one of my problems. I'm continuously having allergies and living on Cyanogen. So what we do try and encourage people to do is, if you are really worried, you can call the Corona hotline. You can speak to people, they'll tell you if you've had a positive contact. Then maybe, if you're having symptoms, you can go. But something that has helped me like ease my calm, my fear, is that Corona doesn't necessarily cause that kind of like sinus congestion, like mucousy kind of thing. The cough that you would get, for example, when you have coronavirus is going to be more of a dry cough. So you'll be coughing and you won't necessarily have sinus. So yeah, I would say number one, call the Corona hotline. There's a COVID hotline. I think there's probably multiple. You can even call your GP. I know that my GP, for example, you know, call the receptionist up, have a bit of a chat. Sometimes it does help to maybe speak to your GP if you know you feel comfortable with them. They're your people. But I think it's important not to freak out. You know, I think as soon as people freak out, silly mistakes happen. And there's no need to freak out. You know, if you have corona, you get tested, and more likely than not, you'll be okay.
Yeah, no, definitely. I do want to just open it up, if you're okay with that. If anybody would like to ask Kayla a question, well, here's your chance. I'm going to put myself on mute, and if anyone wants to ask a question, go for it.
Kayla, if I'm allowed to ask a more personal question, I'd love to know why you became a doctor, and then secondly, how, because I've just seen even with my own friends in the medical profession, like it's one thing going to work every day and being a doctor, it's another thing going to work every day and putting yourself more at risk than you have ever before, you know? And how has that affected you? How has those things been for you?
Okay, so I became a doctor. I wish I had like a fancy story other than I felt called by God, you know, from when before I could even remember. It's always something that I felt that's my calling, you know. For me, being a doctor is a very practical way of bringing the kingdom to the world and to practice social justice and to show people that, you know, as Christians, we'll help whoever. So that for me is why I became a doctor, because God told me to, I guess. And then as what it's like working in the healthcare system, you know, it's interesting for me. Most of my time as a doctor has actually been during the pandemic. So I guess it's almost my norm. But I will say it is stressful, especially when you are working with a patient in the hospital who you thought was negative and then comes out to be positive. You know, then you start second guessing yourself, like, did I take precautions and stuff like that. And it is also very difficult, I will say, wearing the N95 mask, having to run around, do CPR. It is genuinely difficult to breathe when you're doing strenuous exercise in those things. But I think for me, the main concern that I have is taking the virus home to my family. I live with my grandfather. He's well into his 80s, and he's got a chronic lung disease. He's on home oxygen, and there's always that fear that I'm healthy, I'll be okay, I could be asymptomatic. but how would I respond if I was to take it home to him and he contracted it and possibly died? That's a genuine fear that I have every single day that I come back home from work. So I take precautions. I go to work in scrubs. I come home, take the scrubs off immediately, have a shower, and then I'll only go interact with my grandfather. So I think from that aspect, the coronavirus has been difficult because none of us live in isolation. Yeah, so I'm always just scared of that aspect.
And that's a really good reason to become a doctor, by the way. You don't need a fancy story at school.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi, Kayla. How are you?
Hey, good, thanks.
Go, Jane.
My bad. Sorry, Debbie. I just wanted to ask, so my dad's also very safe, and it's really nice being around people who are safe. But with the mask, how would you say is the best way to deal with it once you've come home? Like, let's say you've gone to the shops. Like, should you put it that the outside is face up? Like, we generally do that it's face up on the dashboard so it doesn't touch the dashboard, and then we come home and put it in the wash? Or is it not that intense? Can you like take it off and let it touch the side of your clothes?
So ideally, you don't want to be touching the outside of it, but realistically, you know, no one is perfect when you're taking it off. So I think that's when it's important to, you know, do the hand sanitizing and washing your hands. Another thing that I'm not sure if people know about is that if you put your mask out in the sun or your clothes out in the sun, that's a really quick and easy way to sanitize it. So that's one of the things that we as healthcare workers do when we are reusing our PPE. We put it out in the sun. So if you maybe only have one mask and you don't have time to maybe wash it, you know, when you get home, maybe put it on the washing line and then sanitize your hands afterwards.
Thank you. I actually did that when I bought a shirt the other day. I put it out in the sun.
Yeah, that's the best way. The sun is healthy. It's healing.
Hi, Kayla.
Okay.
I just wanted to actually ask about like family members who, like, you usually can go and visit someone in the hospital, and obviously now there's restrictions and stuff with that. How do you guys handle that? And are there cases where you do still maybe let family members in? And also, have you maybe had people who get like really aggro about it, that they can't see their family members? And how do you kind of deal with that whole side of managing the virus?
Yeah, so people definitely do get aggro, especially if it's, you know, like older parents or grandparents and they are the primary caregivers. You know, they do often not understand why we are taking these precautions. So what we do allow is, you know, you can bring stuff to your parents and maybe like quickly pop in, you know, just be like, hey. So like maybe, I don't know, your family member or your friend needs a toothbrush that they left at home. We do allow you to come and drop those things off. You just basically call the nurse's station and we make sure that everyone allows you in. And there are situations where we do allow longer visits. Those would be cases where the outcome of the patient isn't necessarily a good one. Then we do allow people to come in and spend time with their family, say their goodbyes and things like that. But we are very aware that it's a very difficult thing for patients and for their families. You know, if my family was in the hospital and I wasn't able to see them, I would get upset myself. And I'm a doctor and I even understand that. So I think it's normal to get upset. And unfortunately, we do have these weird restrictions on us now. But I guess we just need to play our part and pray that this thing is going to come to an end so that people can look after their families and friends in the hospital. No, I'm good, thanks.
Anyone else?
I have a question related to vaccines. Do you guys have people that's currently being tested on some of the vaccines, or do you just leave that for other places? Or do you know of any good results, perhaps stuff that people can have at hand before they completely pass out and go? Like, is there any safety precaution measures that someone can perhaps take to have, say, I'm trying to get on the name, is like immune boosters or vitamin C or vitamin supplies? What would you recommend people do?
So with regards to the vaccine, currently we aren't testing anyone. So when you are developing a vaccine, it's actually quite a lengthy process because you don't want to mass produce something and send it out to the world. And it actually turns out that there are issues, and that's the same with testing new drugs and things like that. So currently the earliest we are thinking is going to be the beginning of next year. And even then, we're not sure that it's going to be widely available. So unfortunately, I wish there was a vaccine. It would make all of our lives so much more simple. But this year, it seems like highly unlikely. And then with regards to immune boosters and stuff like that, I think just general things that you would do around the flu season. I think another vitamin C would be good, and taking vitamins, but an important vitamin or mineral actually that people don't think about is zinc. So zinc, we think, is possibly even more effective than taking vitamin C. So when you're taking your vitamin C, pop in a zinc tablet as well. Unfortunately, with Corona, there's so many unknown things. We're not sure if there's something specifically that you can take to prevent it or to help you feel better, because every person seems to be responding in their own unique ways.
Kayla, I've got one for you. Thank you. Thank you for answering that. I've got one for you. So being in your calling, walking in your calling that you believe the Lord's called you for, in this very space that you find yourself in now, as a doctor, having to live your calling through this pandemic, what is the clearest thing you hear the Lord saying to you consistently in this time to encourage you?
I think what I'm hearing is just a continuous reminder that this is actually my calling, and a reminder that even though God calls you to do things, it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. I think that, working in this pandemic, just generally being a doctor in the hospital is very exhausting. But now having this additional fear of wearing PPE and taking it home and stuff like that, something that I find really important for me is thinking about how Jesus wasn't someone who was outside of suffering and outside of illness and all of those things. Jesus dealt with lepers and all sorts of things like that. And I think he's the perfect example of what it looks like to be living your calling. For me, being a Christian and being a doctor is a like I said earlier, it's a means of bringing the kingdom to humanity, and it's a means of practicing social justice and showing people the love of Jesus with your hand. It's a very practical way of showing people that. So I think every day for me is a renewed process of understanding and love that I have for God, because he himself sent Jesus to go and deal with healthcare problems and people of all sorts of situations. And I think, for me, that's the big thing, just knowing that Jesus was essentially the first person to go out and sit with lepers and pray with them and touch them. And I hope that I am able to show people Jesus's love, even though my face is always covered with PPE.
Excellent. Thanks, Kayla.
No problem.
Hi, Kayla. So I just have a question. If you have any advice for people who are currently, going out to work every single day, and sort of the whole fatigue of having to constantly be dealing with all of it, like remembering what you can and can't touch and don't touch your face, and have you sanitize, and is your mask on properly, and just like all of these things that we don't normally have to deal with that now constantly has to be on your mind, as well as like how you interact with other people in your workplace in a way that is still, you know, like you're social distancing and you're keeping those necessary boundaries, but without making it into, I don't know how to phrase it, but like almost making it seem like, oh, I don't care about you, so rather just stay over there, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have any advice around that.
Yeah, so I think you actually bring up like quite an important thing. So there's actually a medical term or psychological term called caution fatigue, where we are so basically bombarded with like, oh, you need to be careful, you need to do that, that you kind of like get over it. And you're like, oh, it's okay if I like don't sanitize my hands here or there or stuff like that. And I think if it's an everyday thing, you know, you do get that fatigue feeling of like, oh, you know, I actually just want to stand outside and breathe fresh air and things like that. And I think an added difficulty that I've seen even within the hospital is that not everyone takes this as seriously as everyone else. So it's very difficult to kind of, you know, for you personally to follow all the rules per se, when maybe your work colleague is a little bit more lax, you know. Sometimes I've noticed, even myself, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm overreacting a little bit. Maybe I can take my mask off, you know, I know this person, there's no way they have it. But I think in those kind of situations, it's important to realize that Corona is out to get people. You know, it is so infectious. It actually sometimes catches me by surprise at how quickly it is that people catch it. So I think, unfortunately, like I don't have an answer for you other than we all need to take personal responsibility for how we manage our health. So we need to make sure that we are wearing our masks properly. For example, don't let like your little nose stick out, and make sure the mask is fitting properly. Don't fiddle with it, and sanitize your hands literally after you've touched anything, after you've even touched your own face. I guess, yeah, people just need to take personal responsibility for their own health.
Awesome. Is there anybody else with a question?
Hey, Kayla. Thanks for your time. I have a random question. In a sense, is this like chicken pox? In a sense, have you seen someone get it and then recover, and then it's, or have you seen people get it and then they come back a second or a third time with infection?
Yeah, so this is the tricky thing about the coronavirus. I have seen people get it and then recover and then they're completely fine. But there have been people even that I'm working with, or that other friends of mine that are working with in other hospitals, who don't fully seem to actually get over it. You know, there's been instances where people, you know, they'll be sick for a couple of weeks, they think they're ready to come back to work, and then it just suddenly hits them again. That's the nasty thing about this virus. There is literally no consistency. I will say, though, that the vast majority of people will have it for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, depending on how severely they have it, and they'll be fine. They'll get over it, and they shouldn't have any lasting effects. In terms of a reinfection, we think the research isn't conclusive about that. So it seems as though people are having antibodies after the infection for 3 to 4 months, which means technically you shouldn't get a reinfection. But once again, we can't say for certain because everyone seems to be responding in different ways.
Kayla, I want to ask you something. So I see that South Africa is getting antibody test kits. What will that do for the healthcare system?
Okay, so antibodies are a really cool way of basically offering protection to people who haven't gotten it. So you can think of the way that antibodies work. If you think about a baby who's born and they breastfeed, from their mothers. An important component of that breast milk is the antibodies that the mother has. And those antibodies directly then protect the baby from infections if they have those antibodies that they got from their mother. So with corona, what the hope is you can take someone's blood who has antibodies, you test it. So not only will it tell you if someone has had corona who maybe didn't test positive, then we can increase the number of positive cases and maybe increase spread testing so that people can know whether or not they've been infected. And then the other aspect of that is you can use those antibodies to potentially help develop vaccines and things like that. So that's a really exciting field of medicine, is this new antibody testing. We have seen it actually in America. They've been doing it for a few months now. So hopefully we'll be able to jump on that bandwagon and move forward like that.
Oh, that's super cool. It's really awesome. Sorry, I just want to ask one last time if there's anybody else, any last question. Other than that, we're gonna jump into prayer. So looks like everybody's
I actually
good.
have one more question. Sorry.
Go for it.
I just remembered now with this concept of like herd immunity, and some people are saying, oh, but everyone is going to get it at one point or the other, and that's actually like a necessary thing, and we kind of just have to have everyone get the virus, get better, and then move on, which to me doesn't sound like the smartest plan, but I don't know. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, so generally when it comes to infectious diseases, we do work on herd immunity, and that's what, the vaccines are that we get when we're children and babies. That offers herd immunity, and it protects people who maybe aren't able to get vaccines, maybe the older people, or maybe they're allergic to some of the components. The issue with corona, however, is that we don't know definitively how everyone is going to react. And what I hear often is people say, oh, but it's only like a 2% death rate. 2% of what is the world population, 7 billion, that's a lot of people. And 2% is all very well and good until it's your mom or yourself or your friend. So I think the issue that we have with this herd immunity is that A, we know that 2% people of the population will die, and B, we're not sure necessarily what are the lasting complications or consequences of having a very severe infection. So some people may have permanent lung scarring if it affects their lungs that severely, if they ended up on ventilation. So herd immunity isn't something that we can safely recommend because we just don't know enough about the virus currently.
Cool, awesome. Kayla, thank you so much for your time. We are going to go into breakout rooms and just pray. So stay with us so that we can also pray. You're going to be in a breakout room and you can pray with. But I do want to ask you one thing before we end off this session is what can we pray for specifically?
I think first and foremost is pray for a speedy vaccine. I think having a vaccine is really going to help us turn the corner with regards to infection and complications and things like that. And I think another thing is to pray for a supernatural peace to transcend amongst the entire population, so that people don't live in this constant fear and anxiety, and that people don't experience that caution fatigue. I think it's important for us to remember that, even though we are struggling, that God will encourage us. He will give us peace and He will protect us. So I think those things.
Awesome, guys. We're going to go into breakout rooms now. Kayla, once again, thank you so much. And like I said in the beginning, this video is going to go up into our social media platforms. And the interview that we had with Shantae, she couldn't be out because she is currently working. So that one is also going to go up on our social media platforms. So just keep an eye out for that. Next hour or so it will be up. And yeah, I think we can go into breakout rooms. To the people who will be viewing this online, we are going to have another conversations session and interview next week at 6 o'clock. And yeah, so just keep an eye out on our social media platforms for another Zoom link, and also who that special guest will be. Awesome. Bless you to everyone, and yeah, enjoy the rest of your evening. Cool.
Okay, you guys are going to be moved to your breakout
Nice.
rooms automatically.